And we're back. You know, for those who survived, the memories of Vietnam live on. Our guest for this portion of our show is Mark Cullison. Mark, good to have you here, lad.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I read the first book that you sent. I'm partway through the second one. I have to confess, I have not finished it. Tried to read some today, and I'm kind of a slow mover. But everything you talked about in that book is echoed by the friends I have that served. The heat, the humidity, leaving home, you know, to make this long junket for the first time, not knowing what you were facing, and when you stepped off the plane in country and how it felt. And I just assumed, you know, and I know the word, I know that as a helicopter pilot, you were going to walk in and have a little bit of a different thing. I didn't realize how much you guys were going through. Rough territory, wasn't it?
It was very rough. You know, when we flew, we'd always think, you know, boy, I'd hate to be down there on the ground, but some of the grunts we talked to would say, boy, I sure wish I was up there, you know.
Yeah.
So you never know.
You went through ROTC, went in as an officer?
I did. Took flight training, ROTC, and decided, you know, I was going to Vietnam. I knew that. Anybody that graduated about then, that's where they wound up.
You went to what, Oklahoma State?
Oklahoma State.
Okay.
And I figured, well, I would go the way I wanted to go, not slugging through the quagmires and whatever.
At the time you went in, was the Vietnam War, was it a war then or a conflict?
Still a conflict. In fact, it was starting to wind down about that point. They were still sending people over. Of course, it didn't make any difference to us. It was our duty to go, and we went.
Give us an idea of a typical day. Were you once you were acclimated to the temperature, the heat, the mosquitoes, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. What was a typical day for you?
Rise and shine early, hit the mess hall for breakfast, go down the flight line, stop by operations and get your mission for the day, the ship assignment, your crew, do the pre-flight on the helicopter. If everything's a go, you get ready and off you go.
Funny as it sounds, you still had to prove yourself with the guys that had been in country for a while, didn't you?
Oh yes, all the newbies. You have to be able to trust your crew. Mm-hmm. You have to have each other's back. The aircraft commander, what we call the Peter pilot or the second in command, then you have the crew chief and the gunner. They all have to work together to make that thing work.
I found it interesting. You were talking about having to go in on a landing, and there was this one guy with you who was a veteran. I mean, hardened. He'd been there for like day one. And when he told you where you were going to land, you said, okay, and took it in and landed it. Right. And he just sat there open-mouthed because so many guys had had trouble with this one particular area, and you just breezed it right in.
Well, by that time, I was pretty seasoned. I'd been in the country a number of months. I knew my way around. Of course, all the new guys that come over out of flight school, you're green. You know how to fly the helicopter, but you don't know how to fly in combat. Mm-hmm. And you don't know how to handle various situations, especially the hot, humid conditions in Vietnam.
You talk about in your book, I don't know, first or second night there, but you know, you didn't have much of a place to sleep, but before the night was out, you were looking for extra cover. It goes from hot as can be to all of a sudden it's cold.
Yes, it gets cool at night, especially where we were in the mountain areas, about mid-country and what they call two corps in the mountains. And during the hot, the day it's sweltering heat, the humidity, you walk out the hooch and you're almost dripping wet. You just sweat.
And the mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes. Yeah.
I can only imagine. You must have looked like as though you had the measles.
Well, they're actually worse in the south part than they are in the northern part. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you get used to it. You just learn to ignore it. And you have to.
Nothing could stop them.
Right, not much.
I've asked you to read a portion of your book, and then I want to talk with you a little bit more about it.
All right.
And this is from the book, The Other Vietnam War.
Yes.
And if you would, just pick it up and go with it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the book.
All right. Yeah, this occurred after my foray into combat missions, my very first experience with live fire. And we just got back. My mind was nowhere in particular. It was as if it had just shut down. I know I had been through a hell of a day, but somehow it just didn't register. It was almost as if I was watching a movie of myself, but it wasn't really me. It was just someone playing the part, and it didn't really happen. Not in my reality, anyway. I looked at the smiles on the guys' faces. Even among them, I felt so alone and scared. Later that night, it dawned on me that nothing had happened to us. We came through without a scratch. Mortar rounds hitting all around us, enemy shooting at us. Nothing happened, just like maybe it wasn't supposed to. Like there was such a thing as destiny, and it played some part in our being there. Or luck. It wouldn't have been much comfort to know the difference. If luck was our destiny, how long would it last? And what would happen when it ran out? That was the first time in my life I had actually thought about the value of my life. Having been through what I had just experienced, I realized that my life wasn't worth as much as I thought it was. It was just my job. So that was the way it was going to be. Exhilaration, then fear, then deliverance, then denial. The vicious circle that would repeat itself every day we had a combat mission.
So it got to be routine, but
Yes.
everybody was afraid, were they not?
To some extent, some guys showed it more than others. Some hid it so well you didn't know. They put on this bravado front, and you never knew. But yes, it concerned all of you because you never knew if you were going to get it that day or not. One thing about flying a helicopter, you're easy prey up there. A fellow with an AK-47 on the ground, well, would come back at night and circle the bullet holes in the tail boom so they could be patched. We didn't even know people were shooting at us. So you never knew.
You must have had an incredibly good ground crew. Man, that really took care of your bird.
The aviation and Army in Vietnam was the best maintenance there is. We couldn't have asked for better. The crew chiefs kept those ships, sharp. They did their jobs. They were always ready when you needed them. Army had a rigorous maintenance routine. Every so many hours, something was done to the helicopter. Every 100 hours, the engine was completely torn down, rebuilt. It was just amazing.
You know, and what's an interesting parallel here, my father, who was in the Army Air Corps in World War II, used to say that were it not for the ground crew that they had on their plane, that he said, I wouldn't be here to tell you about it. Because those guys would meet your plane, ask you what happened, and you didn't joke with them. This was serious stuff. No. And that gave them kind of a clue to what to look for. And he said some of those planes would come back, you couldn't figure out how in the world they could fly. And I bet you guys had the same thing, didn't you?
We did. Of course, we had some that were so badly damaged, they just were taken out of commission until they could be repaired. But the crew chief stayed late, even while the officers were in the old clubs throwing down beers, the crew chief was out on the line working on that bird.
How do you sleep nights? Does it still haunt you?
You're usually, I was one of the lucky ones that was able to put all this in the back of my mind and forget about it. Well, not completely forget, but ignore it. So no, I didn't have a great deal of trouble. Some guys I know it did bother. They got damaged, and it's hard to repair that. But like I say, I was extremely fortunate in that I didn't go through that.
Where's the book available?
It's available online at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Kobo, and even Walmart.com.
Is it selling well?
It has been, yes.
Well, if it's not, it should be. And the other one, I think, is Vietnam Again.
Yes.
Which is also, they got it on the screen. I want to finish that one because I'm intrigued at how you canceled out a lot of debts, solved a lot of mysteries, and made peace with yourself.
That was a very therapeutic trip for all of us that went on that tour.
Mark, I want to thank you for taking time to come in.
Well, I appreciate it.
I hope sales go through the roof on this.
I do too. But I appreciate the time to be here.
Well, you take care of yourself,
Fantastic.
partner.
Thank you
And
very
thank
much.
you for your service.
Thank you. I
We're
appreciate
grateful.
it.
All right, our next guest, well, for this one, collecting became the basis for a book on his part. You'll meet him right after this.